Charles, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So the goal for this series is to really educate retailers, e-commerce enthusiasts, head of marketing, technologists, really think about the entire ecosystem of people that we interact with, to educate them on the latest and greatest technology out there that can really help them hit and exceed their goals, to be innovative, provide a great customer experience. And so I think taking all of those things in sum, it is such a treat to have you with us here today.
Thanks. Same here. You guys are doing some awesome work, so I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So our listeners can learn more about, Charles, the man, the myth, the legend, as well as Dynamic Yield. So I'd love to start off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, because you have so many great gems to impart upon us. I'd love people to get a bit of background on you, and then tell us a little bit about Dynamic Yield and sort of what you are helping them achieve.
Yeah, I would be happy to. I don't know how far back I should go, but I've always been really excited about retail, about tech as well. So it's a really good fit for me to be at the intersection of the two. I actually started way back or co-founded a chocolate retail chain. And
I was going to say, you've got roots as a retailer.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Just really seeing the best of both worlds.
Exactly. And then I got excited about how to be able to sell online and actually leveraging different technologies. I was very early on hooked with Shopify. Actually, I was very fortunate that Harley, who's the CEO of Shopify, was an old advisor or mentor to me as with my old startup. So got very quickly hooked into the Shopify ecosystem and different technologies. And so for the past 3.5 years, I've been head of partnerships at Dynamic Yield. Dynamic Yield is essentially an end-to-end personalization stack. We obviously integrate with Shopify. We love Shopify brands. We have some of the best and most exciting brands that are out there. And what personalization means, and obviously we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what is personalization, because it's a bit of a buzzword these days. But for us, at least, it's really being able to create a end-to-end journey that is contextual, relevant, and that really kind of speaks to each and every visitor in a way that they engage with the brand, right?
So good and so compelling that the user doesn't even realize that there's something intentional happening to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for us, and again, we'll go into the details, but people think of personalization sometimes like, well, I'm personalizing emails, so I'm personalizing. And for us, we kind of take a step back and we think of it holistically of like, hey, if you're personalizing, it's at every single interaction with your customers. And we'll also talk about the fact, and I think what this podcast is also about is like, in reality, though, what can you do? Because there's just, there's the folks that have millions of dollars to throw to solve at this problem to solve it. And then there's the merchants that might be doing like 20 million online, which is also already, really good results, but they want a more practical way to get there. So again, for us, it's personalizing the visitor journey regardless of touchpoint, whether it's on site, mobile apps, emails. We're doing some stuff in store. So that's Dynamic Yield in a nutshell.
Absolutely. I think for me, one of the most exciting things about Dynamic Yield as I sort of learned more about the company is really how you guys take all of these different data points, because companies today really are sitting on just piles and piles and piles of data about their customer and taking all of that and really deploying it in a very smart way. But before we get too far down that hole, I'll pull up and say, I think it's a foregone conclusion that personalization is a good thing. But for argument's sake, let's just start off and say, why is personalization important and how does it help your brand be distinct and stand apart from the noise?
Yeah. So I have my my laptop here. And again, I don't know if it's against protocol, but I had it because there was a few quotes that I liked.
I like quotes.
One of them, and these are like research. Like one of them is like a research piece that came out. 90% of users expect the customer experience to be consistent across all devices, right? So we're in an age where if I'm getting a different message, if I'm getting a different product recommended on my email versus on site versus maybe even like a brochure that I'm getting, if I'm getting targeted like completely inconsistently, it's frustrating the customer experience.
Right. And it's also fragmenting it because customers have such limited mind share that you need to be consistent across channels to really get the message across, because if not, like, I've got a million ads and products coming my way, and it's you have to make sure that you're really differentiating yourself and making that memorable moment.
Totally. And so one of the things that we see again, and even Gartner says this, Gartner says, quote unquote, personalization is the new customer experience battleground. And I think that's true. Like if you want to create a real customer experience where you're connecting with your customers. And again, back in the days that was, we'd walk into a store and you'd have a clerk kind of know your name and walk you through the aisles that you typically buy in, which is to this day still relevant, right? But how do you incorporate that in every bit of the experience that you're delivering, whether it's on mobile, whether it's even in the ads you're serving, et cetera? So I think Gartner's right about that. And the other reason why it's obviously important is because it truly impacts your bottom line, right? So yes, there's the whole story of, yes, it's beautiful. You have to create more meaningful interactions. But at the end of the day, it works from a top line revenue perspective. And I have another McKinsey quote here says, personalization can reduce acquisition costs as much as 50%, lift revenues by 5 to 15%, and increase the efficiency of marketing spend by 10 to 30%. And so what these numbers show is that it's not just fluffy marketing. It's also something that works. And I think it's also because, at the end of the day, we're all in a hurry. We all have busy lives and we want to get to the point. We want to immediately engage with the things that we care about and that are impactful. And so when you land on a site, if you have already products that are contextual, maybe based on the weather or based on where I'm geographically located with the stock levels of the store that's close to me and things like that, that matters. Because otherwise, if I'm looking at a product that's out of stock, like, why are you even showing that to me? Why are you wasting my time? So I think, again, everything comes together. And the truth is, the reason why people use dynamic yield, it has a massive impact on the bottom line of customers. And in terms of acquisition and the way you grow, you need to maximize your ad spend. So you have to optimize the post-click acquisition because at the end of the day, you're spending all this money on ads to drive traffic to your site. And then they get there and 50, 60, 90% of them bounce. So you want to retain as many as possible.
And I love that you talk about being very prudent with that ad spend because there's so many great things that you can put dollars behind, but we've all got limited budgets.
Right.
And I really like that you brought up the example of, it has to make sense. You don't want to keep sort of targeting or remarketing to someone with an out of stock product. For me, that makes me think of many years ago when I moved to New York and I was looking to furnish our apartment and I found the most lovely coffee table and it was out of stock. And for the next 6 weeks,
It's the worst.
every platform I went to, they showed me this coffee table I couldn't buy. So that's really great that Dynamic Yield has, all of this intelligence built into it to make sure that you're not only able to deliver a personalized experience, but that you're helping them be smart with their budgets and that they're not going down the vein of personalization in a way that's actually damaging to their brand.
Yeah, absolutely. But and just a parenthesis, I think these type of small frustrations, like so many of us experience them. And you could say, oh, well, it's a third world problem. Well, maybe, but it impacts like hundreds of millions of consumers, right? And again, like I get the same thing. I even buy product and then I'm still getting retargeted. I'm like, just show me something else. Just, I'll buy something else. Just show me another table.
I think that's great because that also lends itself to the idea of building advocates for your brand. So show me something relevant, meaningful, attainable in stock, hopefully. And so can you talk a little bit about the role that personalization plays in identifying and in creating advocates for your brand?
Sure. So I guess when you think about personalization, maybe I'll take a step back and kind of define what personalization means because people, again, have different definitions.
Right. It's a loaded term.
Yeah, it's a loaded term. And so there's kind of two ways to think about personalization. Number one, there's the true one-to-one personalization. So being able to show an experience that only you, Melissa, will see on that website, whether it's a watch brand or whatever, you will see, basically a whole experience that's unique to yourself. And then there's the segmentation, where basically the brand is saying, hey, you know what? We have X amount of segments we want to target because at the end of the day, you only have so many assets, creative assets, and you only have so many marketers that can create new types of copy, et cetera. So where it's one to many, right? You're creating the broad strokes of saying, hey, we have 100,000 of these type of visitors. They're VIP segments. They're first-time visitors. They're recurring visitors. They're the visitors that spend between 50 and 100, visitors that are based in geos that are above 70 Fahrenheit, whatever those segments are, right? And those are areas, again, where you can have a huge impact, but it's going to be one to many. So once you kind of define that, I think, like when you think about, I guess, targeting those kind of evangelists and those people that really are going to be, sharing your brand and kind of broadcasting it across their own networks. It's about, first of all, identifying those specific visitors based on specific affinities, specific traits, maybe their behaviors on specific social sites, right? And what we do, and again, a lot of other personalization technologies, is when a visitor comes in, we cookie them, we track them. We can also leverage data from a lot of different areas, such as third-party data. We can capture, obviously, and weave in CRM data and email data. And once you identify these visitors, and again, there is part of it that's semi-manual in the way that you have to think about those segments you want to target. But if it is those influencers, then you have to target them in a specific way, because very often those guys are the high-value people that you really want to create a hyper relevant experience and really cater to their needs. So I think if I take a step back, it's about analyzing and understanding those different segments and finding the characteristics of those specific type of visitors. Because again, you can also have like predictive segmentation where the algorithms kind of find segments, but they won't necessarily find the ones that you have in mind when you want to reach those influencers, for example. So, and then once you have that, setting up some of those kind of more manual rules in order to target those segments with different experiences. So with dynamic yield, and I feel like I'm sharing a lot of different concepts here. With dynamic yield, what we do is we can obviously do full one-to-one, right? So showing a set of products, let's say, that's going to be unique among a million SKUs of products to a specific visitor. We can do broad strokes, right? Hey, one to many. For this segment of women, we want to show all these specific women's products, and we have these beautiful hero banners for women, and there's these message and pop-ups that appear for those women. And then there's also a combination of the two, where there's also machine learning that starts identifying for a specific segment multiple different variations, and then within those segments start showing different experiences.
Got it.
So anyways, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but the idea is...
That's really interesting.
Yeah. The idea is basically you combine some of the manual work of identifying segmentations, and that's where you guys have done amazing things, right? You have, like, with Mike and his team, you're able to analyze data sets and segments and how they're performing and do all that homework, basically, and helping the brands get to there.
Right.
And then you can let the algorithms kind of define as well what to show on top of that.
Absolutely. And I think that is such a great transition into my next question. So for many brands, if you think about the early days of personalization, the customer walks into your store, the store associate says, I understand you, I know what you're looking for, I know what you want, and I've developed this relationship and rapport, and I can show you things that are relevant. And when we talk to marketers and heads of e-com, and we sit around a table and we talk about who their ideal customers or who their ideal shopper or brand advocates are, they can describe them in detail. But then once you move to the online transaction, that person becomes less visible in front of you. And there's a few, you're removed by a few screens. And so instead of that one-to-one relationship, now you're trying to develop different customer personas and segments and use that as the basis for this personalization.
Sure.
And a lot of that seems like magic, because it is magical and fantastic. But can you talk to us about the role that data and AI and machine learning is playing at Dynamic Yield to really help to yield all of these great experiences as a net result of all these data inputs and different customers who are visiting the site? What's the secret sauce? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, so, first of all, I'd love to be a genius and be the one behind all of our algorithms. Sadly, I'm not. What I can say, though, is to your point, like, data is kind of the foundation of everything we're doing, right? So the better the data, the cleaner the data, but also the more amount of data you have. So again, it's not always more is better, but I think you definitely need to have the right data to be able to understand the different affinities people have. And then in order to basically target and show and dynamically render experiences in a fashion that's going to be appealing to them, right? So data is definitely key. Now, in terms of how we do it, again, we have an approach where we say pure algorithmic, like if you think of, like, I don't know, Terminator, where something is kind of automatically doing everything, is still, we're not there yet, right? You can't just turn it on and everything happens by itself. So you have to have smart people behind the scenes. So smart analysts, smart marketers that can kind of help guide the machines. And typically we talk about guardrails,
Yeah,
right?
but that's really good because you're still allowing for the brand
Yeah,
who, ultimately they know their brand, what they're trying to get across, who
exactly.
they want to tailor to. So you're still saying, we're going to allow you to inject what makes you so great
Totally. Yeah.
into this
And
formula.
it's actually really critical,
Mm-hmm.
especially with a lot of fashion brands or where I guess I want to say luxury also all the where it's really important to kind of control what you show,
Mm-hmm.
and I think merchandisers and marketers they bring a lot to the table and they know their customers well, and so being able to give some guardrails to the engines and say, hey, for this broad segment, we want to make sure we're going to show one of these 5 different banners or one of
Mm-hmm.
these 10 different messages or one of these different assortments of products. And then, for this different segment, this is what we want. And then within that, we're totally fine letting the algorithm and the machine make all the decisions because we've kind of restrained and controlled what they're going to be displaying.
Right.
But it's not just, hey, we're uploading all these banners, we're throwing all these messages, and it'll figure out where in the funnel is going to be,
Right.
deploying it. And
We're not quite in the Jetsons era
I
yet.
mean, I'm actually looking forward to that area, but to that time. But the truth is, again, I think having that control is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And then you let the algorithms, and we use a suite of algorithms called multi-armed bandits, which basically learn very fast and start shifting traffic dynamically between all these different variations, right? So there's a lot of cool things happening behind the scene. But again, you have to put some thought behind it before and have a roadmap, which is why I'm also always a huge proponent of having a partner like Diff that they've done this before. They know how it works. They know
Mm-hmm.
how to help you build that roadmap and make you succeed because it's not just you turn it on and it
We help you get the
magically
best out of the
happens.
tools.
There you
And
go.
so I think, Dynamic Yield has done such a wonderful job at educating the customer about the importance of online personalization, the importance of creating these unique and authentic and personalized experience. And it seems like the trend of late, and I would say a little bit of the fear of late, is about omni-channel. So everyone's been talking about the omni-channel buzzword, and I think it offers a lot of opportunity,
Yeah.
but it can also be a little scary because you're saying, now I'm introducing this wholly new channel, which is analog. And so how do I how are you really helping brands think about, sort of figuring out the omni-channel personalization sort of enigma? How are you dealing with that?
It's a good question.
Or I guess maybe I find that retailers often it's easier to comprehend very complex concepts through anecdotes. So if you
Yeah.
can talk about any of the dynamic yield customers who
Sure.
are doing some great
Sure.
things
Sure.
with regard to omni-channel
Yeah.
personalization.
The reason why I was a bit smiling is because so I've been in the personalization space for close to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we see everybody from this, the small kind of up and coming brands to the Fortune 100 massive retailers who have, billion-dollar budgets. And um, honestly, first of all, the first thing I'll say is not many people do omni-channel well. Omni-channel is hard.
But everyone's trying to do it. But yes,
Everybody,
that's a
I
good
agree.
point.
Everybody's trying to do it, but I think what I want to say is, you shouldn't sometimes I talk with people and they think they're dumb and they're like, oh, we're not doing anything. Like I don't want to make it overly ambitious. Like if you can do like baby steps and do some things well, it's
Mm-hmm.
great. Um, and I guess again, when you think about omni-channel, you can think already if you're doing like web and email, that's great. You're doing 2
Mm-hmm.
channels there, boom, that's great. If you're incorporating, mobile and you can already do some cross personalization across those 3, touch points,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Then the big gap, which I still see, is brick and mortar, right?
Right.
Offline stuff. That's huge. And I
Right.
think a lot of the reason is because POS is still old technologies that are
Mm-hmm.
basically pretty bad. And so being able to capture that data and connect it to all these different endpoints is not always easy. Um, but truthfully, these things are also changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were asking about, what customers are doing this well. Again, like if I think about the true omnichannel, which I consider, again, also including the offline,
Right.
not a lot are doing it well. So one of our customers is Sephora, obviously a big brand. They're, doing amazing things, some of which they're doing with us, some of which they're not doing with us. But I find that they're doing some cool stuff. They're doing So with us, they're doing like on-site personalization and as well as email personalization. So how do you show the right skincare based on your skin type and skin
Mhm.
tone and those different things. And a lot of it has to do. So there's content, obviously, that's part of this, like the right banner, the right creative assets, et cetera. But there's also the product recommendations. So which assortments of products make sense. And they tie email with onsite, so that's obviously important. They're
Right.
also doing some really cool things with their app. Like if you use their app and you go in store,
Mhm.
you're going to have a different experience, and they're going to be recommending different things. So that's super powerful. I also, and this is not powered by Dynamic Yield. I heard that they're doing some really cool stuff with the Google Home. So I don't know if you have a Google Home, but if you're basically you can add an app, which is the Sephora app, and then you can ask questions about skincare stuff, and
My goodness, I'm
it's
gonna start diagnosing
there you go.
myself.
I think it's called like the Sephora personal concierge or something, and it's great
Ah.
because again, it's really smart. Now, again, they're trying different things out. Does it mean that it's going to drive a huge amount of revenue for them? I don't
But
know,
I think
but
it's
it's still
also
cool.
about, not it would be great if every initiative drove a ton of revenue, but I think there are also the perhaps equally important, but
Yeah,
maybe harder to measure parts of it, like brand awareness, brand
totally,
engagement, creating those memorable experiences. I'll
totally.
say I won't be surprised if when I ask you the same question next year, if we don't see another quite well known omni channel retailer, maybe in the food and beverage industry, that has some great, great case studies about how they're
It
leveraging
could be.
DY technology to get it done.
Yeah, so maybe I should. I omitted to mention this at the beginning when I introduced dynamic yield. I
It's
guess
the elephant in the
Yeah,
room
exactly.
in
The
this
big elephant in
corner.
the room. So about 8 weeks ago, we basically announced that we got acquired by McDonald's out of all companies. Everybody typically thinks of like another tech company acquiring a tech company.
Congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, it's been very exciting, and McDonald's is an absolutely fantastic company. Obviously, has a huge impact on the world, right? I started
Hmm.
learning so many things like McDonald's feeds 1% of the world's population, and they're the biggest toy manufacturer in the world through the Happy Meal program, right? It's like just
I mean, you
crazy.
had Happy Meal toys growing up, right?
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely did.
definitely.
I'm
So
pretty sure I've got one in like a toy chest in my parents' attic somewhere. So
exactly. They're
yes.
like they're like indestructible, I feel.
Hmm.
So what this means, which is exciting, is that we're going to have an even more like bigger impact on like the customer experience and the journeys
Hmm.
of all these different McDonald customers, which I'm also one of. So what does that mean, I guess, for us? And also, I want to take a step back and what does it mean for what we're talking about? Like when you think about it, McDonald's is essentially like, for me, it's almost like it's paradoxical, right? Because they are the company that, whoops, being a little bit aggressive here, passionate.
You're really
Um,
into the
I'm
topic.
into the
It's great.
topic. I mean, for me, it's the company that basically revolutionized food production at scale, right?
Hmm.
How do you like create a burger in a record-breaking amount of time and do it in
Right.
a tasty way, et cetera? So it's not at all about personalization. It's about how do you ship as many as possible to as many people as possible. And now you see them going full 360,
Hmm.
where obviously they're collecting massive amounts of data and
Right.
they want to get back to creating a personalized experience for every single one of their hundreds of millions of customers.
Right.
And that to me it's insane, but
Well,
it's
it is. So for me, I think I'm very bullish on what this means for omni-channel personalization and the awesome things that Dynamic Yield is going to roll out.
right.
Because, I mean, if you think about a retailer, maybe a fashion and beauty retailer, if I want to buy a product from Sephora or I want to buy a shirt from a clothing retailer,
Right.
I probably don't need the shirt right that minute. I
Hmm.
can wait the few days for it to ship. I probably am going back and forth on making a decision.
Yeah.
But when you think about a food and beverage company, like when I'm hungry, I'm not waiting days to eat. Like I am looking to make
Right.
that decision,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
Seize that burger.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, totally.
I think like in terms of like speed and reaction and personalization and some really innovative things,
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what you guys
So there's
come
a
out
lot of
with.
cool things, and so basically, maybe just for some context, what we were doing with them when they were a customer of ours
Hmm.
is essentially personalizing the drive-through experience, right? So,
Mm.
how do you understand the customer's affinity and
Right.
present basically different menu items?
Hmm.
And again, like nobody was doing anything there, and I mean they weren't, and they saw massive lifts when you start treating each customer differently and thinking
Hmm.
about their affinities and thinking about what they might like. and it improved like the overall satisfaction of the customers. They were happier because they were ordering faster and everything was going smoothly. And
Because
it's
decision paralysis is the worst.
absolutely like
the
if you're a
worst.
mom and you have 3 kids in the back, you're going to a soccer game and you're stressed and
Right.
like you know, what do you order? And what if
Exactly.
somebody already knows what you want to order, or can predict what you're going to like? So I think there's a lot of things that are exciting. I mean, again, I do want to mention that we can still work with basically all the different lifestyle brands that we work with and the different apparel companies and we work with so many fantastic brands. We don't want to turn our back to all of those.
Well, no, it's great. I mean, I think we both attend so many wonderful conferences throughout the year. There was Shop Talk earlier this year, and what has really struck me is that I go to a lot of the talks and for companies that maybe I don't run into all the time, even from adjacent industries. And at the heart of it, it's really about the transaction with the customer.
Yeah.
And we're all selling different things to more or less the same group of customers. So there's still so much to learn. And I think what you guys have done is really made the cohort of dynamic yield customers that much more valuable to learn from.
Totally. And we can also use that for cross-pollination, right? How can we, pass that over, that type of learning, those type of learnings over to maybe even like other sectors like financial services or travel, who knows, right?
Right, exactly.
So it's
and so,
fascinating.
I think there's so much opportunity with personalization, but then there's always that one question that we get about, is there a limit? Is there a point where it's too much personalization? Is there a point where it gets creepy? How do you guys think of that balance, sort of building authenticity and trust versus the creepy factor?
Yeah. So maybe I can talk about, so it's a great question and I get it a lot. I can talk about like there's the extreme example, which is it's pretty iconic now. It's like I think back even in 2012. So it was like a long time ago, like the early beginnings of personalization. Target essentially was sending out personalized flyers. Have you heard the story?
I haven't.
So they were sending out
Tell me more.
personalized flyers, and what ended up happening is one day there's a really angry customer that walks into a Target and says, "What the hell are you guys doing? This is addressed to my daughter. She's only 16, and you're showing her baby cribs and baby stuff. Like, what are you trying to get her pregnant or something?" And the guys were like, "I'm so sorry. It's our mistake."
Or they like, actually, your 16-year-old is having a baby.
And 3 hours later, he calls back and he's like, "Look, I had a conversation with my daughter, and it turns out that she's pregnant and she's expecting in August, and I wanted to apologize." So, that story is it's interesting, right? Because there's all those facets, right? It is a bit creepy because like how do you know that I'm expecting? And it turned out that they had found out that if you buy certain creams and all these different things, then it's indications that you're pregnant, and they were spot on. So you definitely want to have people thinking about it. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, you don't want to have full AI just take control of everything.
So that's such a great point. There's a very recent example that's very similar. There are a lot of interest groups and communities that you can join on Facebook. And what they were seeing is that people who were expecting a child might start to join these groups and get targeted with products. And if for whatever reason that did not come to fruition, how, they leverage personalization and AI to know, like, okay, we shouldn't be targeting them with these things anymore. Like, this is now a sore topic. So yes, very similar. You're right. There is a degree of like responsibility and, making sure that you have someone who's like looking after the controls.
Exactly. That's kind of putting some, how do you say it?
Like guardrails in place.
And like a reality check. Hey, does this make sense? Should we be doing this?
Right.
But I did want to talk about another example, which is a little bit tangential, like the flip of the coin.
Yeah.
We have a customer in Germany called Caltech, and they started out as a DJ specialized store. So they were selling all these DJ equipments and these turntables and all these things. And they had this group of passionate DJ folks that would just go online, just want to buy DJ stuff. And over the years, they were super successful, started growing, and they started adding more things, microwaves and refrigerators and all these other things. And what ended up happening is their core group of customers ended up being fed up. They're like, "Hey, I'm coming on the site. You're selling me a microwave or it's totally irrelevant. What the heck?" And so they started losing this core segment, which was spending a lot of money online, and it became a huge problem for them. And with personalization, what they ended up doing is, they're a customer of ours, essentially creating completely different experiences. If you are into DJ stuff, you will land on a different site. You will have different products. You will have, like, even as you click through
Yeah.
the funnel,
I
all the
think
way to
that's
checkout,
that's the dream for like
completely
any
different.
multi-brand retailer. I think so much of what we've seen with like the retail apocalypse of like years past, right,
Yeah,
is that you're increasing SKUs and product
right.
selection because you want to sell more things to more people, but you
Exactly.
can't alienate that core base, and you want to make
Totally.
sure that when you show up to the site that you're seeing everything that you want that's relevant to you that makes
Yeah.
you feel like they get me and I'm going to come back and I'm going to keep shopping here and not
Yeah.
like they get me and everyone else too.
Exactly. And so the reason I wanted to bring that example is it's actually the inverse. Without personalization, they were losing their customer. They
Right.
were fetting them up. And by being a little bit more tactful, by being a
Mhm.
little bit more kind of attentive to the real passion that their original key segment had, and going back to delivering that experience for them, they had a huge impact in performance. I'm not sure I can share the numbers, but huge impact in
Got
performance,
it.
and they regained that original segment or cohort of visitors that they had lost, basically.
Got it. So what I'm hearing is that for personalization, there's no silver bullet. It's an art and a science. Luckily, we have people like Charles and companies like Dynamic Yield to sort of help us find our way.
And Diff, of course. I mean,
And Diff.
with amazing, no, like it's really that, you were talking about people with using the different levers. You guys are the ones using the levers, right?
Absolutely. Helping customers really understand how they harness the power of the platform and get the most out
Exactly.
of it. And so, we've touched on a few themes, both what is personalization, how do you do it really well, what is that sort of thin line to be mindful of, what are the new frontiers for personalization
Yeah.
vis-a-vis omni-channel. And so a lot of great topics. We could talk about this, any of these all day. If I'm a customer or a prospective customer, or just general personalization enthusiast, and
Sure.
I would like to learn more about any of these topics that Dynamic Yield has so much information on, how do I learn more? What's the best way to get in touch?
So first of all, I want to say a few things before that. I want to say that don't get overwhelmed, because we talked about a lot of different things, and you can go from 0 to 100, right? So don't
Mm-hmm.
get overwhelmed. You can start with baby steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, again, people like you can have a crawl, walk, run approach.
Mm-hmm.
And we put together. Thank you for all the work. A basically a quick start or jump start package where you guys
How to get
can do that.
started and
Yeah.
get the most value.
So I think those type of things are really critical. And we also have on our website, we have something called the personalization maturity assessment. And you can go ahead and take it. I don't know what the URL is. You can just type dynamic yield personalization maturity assessment and just take it. See where you are on that scale. And by the
Mm-hmm.
way, don't get offended if you have a 20 on 100.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally fine. It means you have amazing opportunities to get
Right.
better, right? So again, if you want to find out more, obviously dynamicyield.com. You can reach out to me directly, Charles at dynamicyield.com as well. We're always happy to help. And there's just a ton of content on our website as well. If you want to check out our blog, there's just amazing things. And obviously your blog does a lot on personalization too. So
Absolutely. And so, because we're coming to
uh-oh.
everyone live from New York,
Yeah.
when you are not when you're not helping people with their personalization initiatives and growing e-com revenues online, where can we find you in New York?
Where can you find me in New York? That's a great
Where are
question.
you
Well,
having a great customer experience?
this is going to sound a little bit boring. We were talking about this beforehand. I have a kid, and I live next to the park. So, especially in the summer, I'm in Central Park pretty much every day. Because if I pick up my son, we go to the park. If I'm on a weekend, I go to the park, unless it's pouring. So you're likely to see me playing frisbee in the park somewhere around 95th.
Got it. So if I'm a brand and I want to personalize your experience, probably some sort of umbrella accessory for the stroller, maybe like
Definitely.
interactive park
Yes.
toys for
Yes.
you and the family
And
to play
mobile
with.
friendly, please. Mobile
Mobile
friendly.
friendly.
Yes, make sure I can have a proper checkout experience on mobile because I buy on the fly.
And like, with one hand holding the baby. So personalization enthusiasts,
Definitely.
this is a new key customer segment that you got to clue into. It's the dads enjoying summer in New
Absolutely.
York.
Yeah.
Amazing. And
100%.
so we've talked about, I think, so many wonderful topics. We know how to get in touch, but, if our listeners can walk away with just a few gems that they keep with them from this conversation, what would your key takeaways be?
It's a good question. So key takeaways. So first of all, I hope this kind of conversation made people aware that personalization is critical to your customer experience. It's critical to building your brand, actually, right? Because it creates that one-to-one experience with your customers. Number two, I will say, don't get like set goals that are realistic and don't get over like concerned about, oh my God, I'm not doing enough, et cetera. Just take baby steps to get there. And that's why and this is not, I'm not saying this because it's a promotion of you guys, but I really think that at the end of the day, you have all these great tools. Dynamic Yield is a fantastic tool, but the tool will only go so far if you don't have the people to manage that tool and to run that tool, right? So, of course, you can have people in-house. And if you can do that, great. But having an experienced marketer, an experienced analyst, an experienced analytics guy.
An agency partner.
No, it's expensive having all those guys on your payroll. An agency combines all these people and gives you top talent for a fraction of the cost. So, however you want to do this, find the right people. As Jim Collins says, like put the right people on the bus. So get that right talent with you. And you guys have amazing talent. If not, hire the great people, and people that also have an approach and a methodology of always being inquisitive and testing. Because at the end of the day, with personalization, and I didn't say this enough actually throughout this podcast, but personalization and testing and optimization all go hand in hand. We all have different hypotheses, and we're trying to test them, and you have to let the algorithms kind of show what ends up working. And so you have to have the right people, the right mindset, the right methodologies, and then you're going to have an amazing results.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Charles.
Thanks
We've
again for having
learned
me.
so much. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, so if anyone wants to get in touch with Charles, it's charles@dynamicyield.com. You can also take the assessment at the Dynamic Yields Personalization Assessment. Maybe there'll be a URL here.
Exactly.
Maybe not. We'll see. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Melissa.
That's a
Great
wrap.
to have
We're
you.
done.
Woo!
Yeah. Woo!